cause, because I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a community no one wants to join, and one that I didn't want to join. In 1997, my daughter Cassie was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that was just earth-shaking for my family and I. She was 1 year old, her pancreas was broken, she was insulin dependent, essentially a life sentence that she would need insulin for the rest of her life. And aside from her day-to-day care, one thing my wife and I decided to do was to do what we can to support her. So we joined JDRF. JDRF is Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, focused on type 1 research and advocacy. Went to Washington. We lobby almost every other year on behalf of patient rights with diabetes, and also to raise funds for research. JDRF became a community for us. It became a second lifeline. We were connected with other patients, other families, connected to doctors, reliable babysitters that we could go to, and it became a second family. I started to tweet about this, just like other folks in Washington. And we became really big advocates where folks who didn't have a type 1 connection became part of this extended community. That is the multiplicative aspect of what we were able to do, building a community and committing our network to this larger cause. Within this larger cause, we've been able to, actually this is an online community that I started through JDRF. It started out as juvenation.org, is now type1nation.org. It's got tens of thousands of members and community members who participate to learn about what is going on, to connect with each other, for support, for information, and yes, they're talking about you. They're talking about your brains. How does it work in real life? When I started, I built it for my daughter, who was a tween at the time, and I thought she would connect with others so she wouldn't feel so alone. I was super surprised. In about the first year, most of the folks were adults. I thought they would be all the kids going around like this, and no, they were adults, people who were making health decisions for themselves, or they were caregivers. And that totally blew my mind. But a lot of the content that we'd originally brought out there, it stayed fresh because the content that the rest of the community brought out there was relevant to their peers. They would ask things like, why am I craving milk? How do I figure out my insulin to carbo ratio? Should I take insulin before or after meals? And they would get real life, patient to patient, community support and answers. Healthcare providers would jump in as well, and they would get quote unquote free advice from talented professionals who were committed to being part of the community. At about 1:30 in the morning Eastern time, this thread came out, and I kept all the misspellings on there from a community member named Blaze. She said, thanks for the invite, and I'm going to cut my wrists because I want to die because of diabetes. Essentially, it was like a suicide hotline plea. I wasn't awake, and I hadn't trained any of the staff at JDRF to handle this. And there were folks on the community that jumped right on there. There were 3 folks who talked her off the ledge, and turned out great. This happened 2 or 3 more times. The stuff that's going on in the community is real stuff. It doesn't happen at the surface level. It gets down to life and death. So let me tell you about my new company, Bigfoot Biomedical. It makes sense, right? that why would I want to leave fintech or HR tech or the fancy schmancy world of fashion and Tiffany and Company to do this? Because I'm a member of this community. This is the highest, most important thing for me. And the thing about Bigfoot Biomedical as a brand was that the company came from the community. The founders were the former CEO of JDRF, whose son has type 1 diabetes, and then somebody that Wired magazine had stalked because he had built an artificial pancreas by hacking into an old Medtronic insulin pump, a Dexcom continuous glucose monitor, and built his own algorithm so they would talk to each other and would automatically dose insulin for his child. So the founders came from the community, and they continue to join from the community. Another founder, the former chief engineer on the Medtronic 670G, Lane Desborough, and we start to bring in experts to help us bring this to market. These are some of the kids and family members. We know insulin is an amazing drug, but it's also dangerous. But we have, from our community, we built a brand, and we built a company, and are building a product to bring to market where we have a deep understanding that isn't coming from, a third-party focus group view. We're intimately involved with it, and our mission is to free people with insulin-requiring diabetes to live the lives they want. Having dealt with this disease and having all this input from the community makes us realize it's not a silver bullet. It's going to take more than just a doodad or a new drug. It requires a more holistic approach where not only are we working with different devices, we're making them talk to each other. Not only are we making them talk to each other, we're utilizing the data and having the software so that it'll go up to the cloud and talk with healthcare providers and also be able to be used eventually for auto titration and for personalized dosing. And lastly, it's bundled as a complete service. I cannot tell you how difficult it is to fill a prescription for 12 different things, and you have 5 of one and not enough of another, and you need them both in order to work. So we are delivering the entire package except for the insulin as a service, and we're doing this all online and doing all the training and partnering with great folks like Lilly and Abbott and every major insulin manufacturer to be able to deliver a complete offering by listening to our community, by staying connected with them. So this is the marketing department. Melissa, who's right over here, is not a trained marketer. And she was the first marketing hire for Bigfoot. She came as the executive director at 2diabetes.org, where she was leading a community of people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. That's how important the community is. And her director is not director of marketing, her title is director of community. Right now, that is an underlying pillar of what will make our brand resonate and stay relevant with the products and services that we deliver. So, we ask ourselves, how does tech factor into digital marketing and social networks? Well, it's not all about the technology, it's about the human connection. So what are you doing so that you are not just talking about me, but we? If you do not lead the conversation, it will happen without you. If you try to have a conversation as a monologue, it will not be as fruitful as it should be. Because the brand is owned by you and by your community. That's it for me. If you've got any questions, I will take any questions except from Amanda. And only 3 lightning round.
Lightning round questions. Thank you for a very, very moving and personal presentation, and I think a lot of value on the importance of community. So